Mesdames et messieurs, maybe in French would be easier. Oui, parce que ce sont des Français qui sont à l'extérieur. French people outside. We're going to start again. I know, sorry, it's like a rush, but we've got to say so many things. And yes, unfortunately, someone asked me we won't be able to talk about all the countries present this morning because we're too many to tackle 20 or more education systems. So I'm sorry for that, but you've got like 4 days in total to talk about your experiments. So don't worry, we'll talk about all of you during these days coming. So during this second roundtable, we'll try to show that, to show what philanthropies are doing to promote climate change education and their role in the development of CCE? No, of climate change education. To do this, we welcome on stage, let me sit, Nina Smidt. Nina Schmidt, sorry. Nina. Smidt was right, okay. Nina Smidt, okay, from Germany. Nina comes from Germany. She's the CEO, managing director and spokesperson for the board at Siemens Stiftung, an internationally priority foundation with a focus on education, social entrepreneurship, arts and culture. Then we've got Vivian Puerta Guerra from Colombia. She comes from Colombia. She's the CEO of the EPM Foundation. Empresas Públicas de Medellín. Yes. See? She's a pioneer of education for sustainable development in Colombia, and she has spearheaded transformative initiatives in the realm of climate education. And then we have Dr. Deb Morrison, coming from Canada. Deb comes from, she's a scientist and educator. During the pandemic, she founded the organization Climate Learning for Empowerment, Action and Resilience, Clear Environmental. She works with and for communities, organizations and governments to engage in organizational change that leads to just climate actions and forces global sustainability. I'm sorry, I'm just going to ask you not to talk too much because we can't hear really what's happening here. For me, I can hear many, many voices. And so we're going to start with Nina. Nina, can you just explain how, during the last few years, Siemens Stiftung has been increasingly focusing on climate and sustainability, particularly in the field of education in Germany and Latin America? The floor is yours. For 5 to 7 minutes each. At 5 minutes, I would make you a sign.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. And of course, first of all, I would like to thank you for hosting this wonderful seminar, Eric, David, Pierre, and of course the entire team of the Office for Climate Education. It's a pleasure to be here and to see so many familiar faces. There is not enough time to catch up in the breaks, but I see a lot of familiar faces here, specifically from the partner institutions in Latin America and Africa, so very happy. Just a few words about what we do at the Siemens Stiftung or Siemens International Foundation. We are a foundation that has been established by the company Siemens, but we are working independently from the company and we are working internationally. So we predominantly work in Europe, in Latin America and in Africa. And of course, the most important, and this is going to be my initial point, the most important aspect is here, if we are talking about climate and sustainability, if we talk about climate change education, we cannot do it alone. The most crucial point is really to work in networks, to work in a co-constructive and cooperative way. And that's why it's so important to have gatherings like these here today to exchange thoughts, to exchange best practices, but maybe also to exchange some ideas of what is not working, and maybe also to encourage each other to keep up the optimism and to keep on going. One of the examples of a network that I would like to mention, and I know you're going to hear a lot more during the next couple of days from some of the organizers, some of the key stakeholders within that network, is the Red STEM Latin America network. That is a network of 180 partner institutions working throughout Latin America, among them many top-notch universities, some of them being present here today, foundation partners, ministries of education, and my my colleague Vivian Puerta is here today as well, who is heading the working table on climate and sustainability and climate change education. So this is an example of how important this kind of co-constructive and cooperative work is. A second point that I would like to make is the importance of open educational resources. Because if we believe in offering high-quality teacher education programs that can actually be used then for school, but also out-of-school purposes, there is, of course, the opportunity to work in one face-to-face teacher training programs, but this does not take us all the way we want to go. So basically providing digital platforms, but most importantly, digital platforms that use OER resources, in our belief, is really important. And here again, we team up with partners, international partners worldwide. We have 2 media portals at the moment. One is a media portal where we primarily work with partners in Germany, in Europe, and in Africa. And one specific media portal has been set up in the last 3 years with the help of all the Latin American partner institutions called CREA. And I think during the seminar, you're also going to hear a little bit more about that. And the third point that I would like to make is the importance of monitoring and evaluation. So I think we heard a lot already from the scientific, from the academic perspective, how important it is to really consider, to really stick with the facts and to teach basically the fundamentals of climate change education to teachers and at schools. And therefore, it is also so important for our programs to always monitor, to evaluate, and to take into consideration what is actually the impact that we are generating with the programs. How do we evaluate, and what is working, and hence what is not working, what do we have to change? So these are the 3 main points that I would like to make at this point, and looking forward to the discussion with you and to receiving some questions from the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nina. Just I keep this optimism. What you said about optimism, which is really important, and networking. So really, I will have many questions coming. So Vivian, we just explain you the CEO of EPM Foundation in Colombia, and could you just explain to us your vision of this climate change education?
Well, I have the honor to lead an amazing team in Colombia at the EPM Foundation. We are fully committed to education for sustainable development, ESD, and especially we are having a lot of initiatives regarding climate education. The EPM Foundation is part of the EPM group, which provides public services to a lot of different municipalities in Colombia, more than 450 municipalities with water, energy, gas, and other related services. At our foundation, the ESD is included in our mission and our purpose. The whole organization breathes sustainability, and we have a lot of different initiatives. So given the short time that I have, I will just focus on 4 of them. First of all, what we did was we needed to educate our employees, because if we wanted to actually make an impact in every time that they encounter a person, because we run 17 different urban spaces at the city of Medellín, we needed them to understand and actually how to make a call to action to all that people that goes by our spaces. So this has been an amazing journey with them, and it's actually right now part of our onboarding process. Second, we created an ecosystem of sustainable experiences with the 17 spaces that we have. We have the Water Museum, where we, of course, talk about water, but we also teach how the climate change is impacting the different ecosystems. We have 3 rooms in that museum that are dedicated to this subject. And there is one specifically to train the trainers. So we receive caregivers, we receive teachers, and we train in the pedagogical contents that we have developed. We also have the Wishes Park. At that park, we promote the production and local consumption. So we have an urban farm at the rooftop, and we promote people to have urban farms at their houses. We also teach from the kids to the elderly the importance of healthy food and the importance of what is the impact of buying foods from another part, you know, because of transportation, the gas emissions and everything. That is not a simple thing to actually explain to a normal citizen. So that's what we do there. Also, we have special places around the water reservoirs. It's called UBA. And in those spaces, we promote a sustainable educational agenda. We talk about the protection of water, the protection of biodiversity, climate change, sustainable cities, and we don't just expect the people to come to our spaces. We actually partner up with the public institutions, with the public kindergarten to take all our knowledge to them. Final but not least, we have the EPM library. We are very, very proud of the EPM library because we just received the award of the best green library in the world. Not just because we promote education for sustainable development during a lot of activities that we held there. We have a SDG Club, which is an UNESCO initiative. We have a special room for My Name is Earth that I'm going to talk to you about in a minute. And we have also a farm, urban farm at the rooftop, and so many other things. Of course, we have solar panels and energy. Well,
Library in Spanish, uniquely?
Library in Spanish?
Biblioteca. In Spanish or in English as well? The library, sorry.
The library?
Yeah. Because you were talking about this green library, so just wanted to know if it was only in Spanish or in Spanish.
Only in Spanish. Oh, we wish to have a lot of people bilingual in our country, but no, we are not. But our contents in this case are in Spanish and English. The third initiative that we have is this, My Name is Earth. I had the opportunity to be in a world conference held by UNESCO regarding ESG. And when we were preparing that conference, a lot of people were saying there is no pedagogical contents for early childhood. And we believe this is a need. I mean, as you guys were saying here, we need to prepare the students since the early ages. So we took that idea and we developed these early childhood contents for early childhood and also for elementary school. Then they are available at a website, totally free, as you do with all your contents in Siemens. And they are in Spanish and English because we want to, expand this information to everybody that you can download the pedagogical guides and everything. And finally, we have another project called Freedom, because we don't just educate, we also give tools to the people so they can actually take action. So in the case of Freedom, we promote mobility sustainable, sustainable mobility, And we give away, we will give away because we already gave 600, but we will give 2,250 bikes to students from public high schools and public universities at the city of Medellín. In order to get those bikes, it's not like we are just giving away because we like to. No, they have to study education for sustainable development. They need to understand why biking is important to contribute to the situation that we are going through. It's not easy for us in a country like Colombia where we have so much water, that people actually feel like, okay, we don't generate a lot of gas emissions. Why we should do something? This should be another problem. But the first thing is to teach about global citizenship education. Whatever you do here has an impact in another part of the world, and you need to be empathic, and you need to be to promote solidarity. So it's the first thing that we teach to all the people that we have, because we had the amazing opportunity to have kids from the very early age until the elderly. I mean, through our ecosystem passes more than 2.5 million people during a year. So we just carry out this message every time we can.
Thank you. Thank you for your enthusiasm, Vivian. I think you can give your book to Deb, because she was watching it, and I think there's going to be a library just around here. So, okay, there's a signature afterwards. So now we're going to open the floor to Deb, and she's going to talk to us about this clear environmental organization she just created. You've got the floor, Deb.
Thank you. I'm going to start a little different. Even though I am very much a scientist at heart, I'm going to tell you a very brief 1-minute little story. So as a child, growing up in rural Canada, I walked with my father, very small, before I went to school. I walked with my father up into the mountains because our water supply came out of a creek and then into a cistern. And so every couple times a year, the bears would bite the water line, and we had to go and fix it. And as we walked, my father would talk to me about the forest we walked through, about the water we depended on, about the bears and how they understood the water and thought it was bees in the line. And I learned ecology in these spaces. And then I went on, through as a first generation college student, all the way through school studying science, studying biogeochemistry. But I did that because of the values instilled by my father in these walks. And I say this story because we've heard this morning many different things that are important as we think about climate change education. But I want us for a minute also to think about, what is climate education, okay? What does it really mean? Some of it is that deep knowledge base that we need to understand. We need to understand our critical thinking, our systems thinking, all of the things that Jun and Eric and others this morning have named. But the other half of the work in defining and building educational systems that are sustainable, that are deep and meaningful, that are networked, is about understanding how we mobilize people. And we mobilize people by reaching in and engaging their hearts, okay? And then through engaging their hearts in these deep value-based ways, we can get them to use their minds to inform their hands, okay? So we cannot just throw knowledge at people. That does not work, and we understand this. So, and as a learning scientist designing systems and thinking about how to inform and change those systems, one of the things that we really need to do is work with leaders, politicians, educational leaders, business leaders, educators, community organizations. We need them to truly engage deeply in the work. We need their hearts engaged so they put their money on the table and we can do the work we need to do. But we need to do that. The second sort of main component of that work is what you're mentioning earlier. We need to do this in a networked, coherent, relational way, because those networks are what we understand. We trust people, we know people. And through those trusted relationships, we build and share our knowledge, whether it's accurate or inaccurate. And so we need to actually travel those relational pathways and networks and ensure that the accurate, scientifically informed knowledge is moving along those networks. So that type of large network building is actually something known in research as not working. So we need to build networks and tie them together more deeply. And so all of that kind of work is stuff that I've been engaged with for long time, actually. And Clear Environmental, we started specifically to try and address this leadership level work. So I was deeply involved in the Glasgow work program and creating it. I helped brief and inform many, many of the negotiators worldwide, and helped define the action plan resulting from that, and to try and get people to dig down deeper and understand, what does it mean to be responsible to the work? What does it mean in any role that you have to take action? And we actually managed to get justice woven into the action plan, which was more difficult than you imagine in a country-informed process. And so really trying to think about how we do that, and how we continue to do that as we engage in implementation work across the world.
Thank you. Just you can use the other mics if you need. Yeah, just try this one. Thank you, Deb. Just first, I would have maybe the first question for you, Deb, because we've got here two philanthropics here, and you're not working for any foundation, but you happen to go sometimes do lobbying to get some money, some funds for that. And what would be, maybe a tricky question, but what would be the limit of private funding?
I'm not one to set limits on anything. Yeah, I would.
Are there any limits?
I don't believe there are. So what I work both in advocacy work with governments and with foundations, and have relationships with foundations that are learning relationships. So helping foundations think about what they know, what they ought to know, who they ought to know. But I think one of the things that we have seen in the advocacy work, for instance, work I've done with the US government, is that large governmental changes need pilot work. So they need proof of concept work done before they can mobilize large government efforts. And so we need to collect not only practice-based work that foundations really need to take that role, but we also need to make sure it's well documented, to the monitoring and evaluation comments that have been done today, that it's well documented and mobilized in very specific ways. Research papers that sit on a shelf, and I say this as a scholar, are pointless. So we need to make sure that research is mobilized into policy briefs, into practice briefs, into actual real world activity, and that it's informed from real world activity.
Girls, do you want to react? Not? It's okay. That is okay. Just take it.
Is
nothing
it
to do.
Working?
Yeah,
okay.
It's working. Take it close to your mouth. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely think that the alliance with the public entities, in our case, has been very, very important. For instance, these contents were made in alliance with the Ministry of Education of our country, and now is going to be a public policy in our country. So we are very proud because they actually assign a team of 10 people, 10 techniques. Every single word that is in these books has been reviewed, from a lot of different point of view, since checking if they will provoke some anxiety for the kids, because that was one concern. You are talking to the kids of 4 years old. How are you going to do that? That's very, dangerous. What we did was we need to teach those kids that they live in a planet and that the planet is having trouble and they can help. We will do it in a very hopeful way. And how do we transmit this message? We have a very successful puppet show. And at the end, the kids live so happy, and they want to hug Earth because we have a big dummy of Earth. And they are oh, we want to take care of the planet. And just like that, it's just an amazing result, because those kids, they weren't talking about the planet at all. And now they feel that they know there is a planet that need to take care of. And also it's a way for us to get to their parents. So it has been a short but an amazing journey, because this book came alive last year and the elementary this year. And we are going to start, because we also believe the importance of evaluation. We are going to start, now that we have the 2 books, the process of monitoring and evaluating how this is going, because right now we have a lot of testimonies and we have like an agenda totally full, that people who want to know more about what we are doing about climate change, which is important, but we need to establish some objectives that will be measured in order to actually show the world that this is working in the way we want to.
Thank you. Nina, you wanted to react?
Yes, I wanted to react also to something that you both alluded to, and that is something that came up also this morning when we were talking about this immense challenge of climate change, and that we need various stakeholders from different parts. We need the industry, and we need government partners, we need civil society and philanthropic partners, etc. But one of the challenges, and that's why your question is a tricky question actually, is how do we manage and how do we basically set up, or should these networks be set up and controlled in a way, or what kind of mechanisms do we need, right? I mean, to give you one example, what we find, what I mentioned earlier, is the network of the 180 institutions working together now in Latin America on STEM education, future skills, and also sustainability and climate change education. How do you grow within such a network, and what are the partners that are you looking for? Is it mainly from the non-for-profit side, from the scientific sector? How do you deal basically also with the industry perspective or the company perspective? And I think this also comes back then to your question, that is of course the financing question, because in the end, when you think about how to maintain these networks and how to implement operative programs, etc., you need funding. And what is a good balance of funding? How do you stay independent from political interests, from industry interest, but still at the same time basically join forces with a joint mission to create impact? So I think it's critical, it's difficult questions, it's not easy to answer.
And you were talking about what was working and what is not working. You said that the word is behind. What are the biggest obstacles you have encountered in your efforts to develop climate change education? What would be the one to face or to fight? The one who wants.
I have a list. I heard the list of earlier this morning. I think Eric mentioned a number of things. I think I would add to the list that he provided challenges, especially I would say in civil society, of limited resources creates a competitive stance between organizations. So then it reduces collaboration because people are seeking the same finite or minuscule resources. So that creates a problem. So I think when we can start to establish networks that then foster enough funding to sort of get away from that competitive stance, we start to see examples where more money is brought into the system. It's actually, I wouldn't say it's brought into the system. More money that is in the system is leveraged toward learning and collective efforts, because I think there is actually enough money in many systems. The problem is it's not coherently or effectively utilized. And so when you get the diversity of partners in a finite system working together, it actually starts to pull in money in different ways that you wouldn't have thought before. So an example of that that I've been working on for the last 6 years is the Washington State Climb Time Project. And it is legislatively funded by the state of Washington's public money. But we have a number of private philanthropic partners. We have business involved, and collectively that network, so there is no center to the network. The network is multimodal in the middle. And so government does things, research universities do things, civil society does things, and we all have sort of a shared leadership role. There's a panel of people who lead it. And we listen closely, we monitor continuously in the network what is needed, and we build resources, all OER resources. We build resources as needed and refine things. And that type of emergent dynamic system is what I think we're going for, to really implement climate change in different locales to effectively meet the needs of those locales.
Okay, so centralization is not often, not always a good solution. It can be decentralized. What's your opinion, Nina?
I think also one of the biggest challenges is, and you were talking about that, is basically having an understanding of the actual demand. So I think one of the biggest mistakes, in a sense, is basically to design program initiatives or ideas without taking into consideration the demand that is actually existent in the specific regions, in the districts, in the communities, etc. And this resonates.
Would you have an example? Would you have an example?
Yeah, this resonates also with one of the comments you were making earlier about maybe the role also of philanthropy in a certain way. I know that not all foundations are working in such a way, but I think we do, in a sense, as a foundation, have the ability, we have the financial means, but we also have the more agile structure in that we can actually test case certain scenarios. So in other words, we can work with local partners on the ground in basically finding what is the specific need, what are the specific circumstances of a community, and how can we best work with specific programs or with specific initiatives to tackle some of the questions here. And I think this is something, since you were asking about examples, this is an approach that we take in all of our program initiatives, in the education field, in social entrepreneurship, art and culture, in that we always work very closely with the partner organizations in the specific countries, in the specific regions. Whether it's on the topic of what do specific schools need to teach climate change education in a specific context, right? Because climate change education, there is no global curricula, right? I mean, it needs to be context-based also. But also when we work, for example, in the area of social entrepreneurship, we do a lot of work on access to safe water. So what are the specific demands, for example, when we talk to underserved communities in Kenya, for example, or when we work in Uganda? So I think this is very important, and a lot can go wrong if that step is not taken. But again, it's not an easy step because it takes a lot of initial work in identifying that need and working with the partners, and only afterwards some of the scaling, as you were describing it, can take place. And interestingly enough, this is actually a point where quite often we, as the Siemens Foundation, actually step away. So once initiatives are running and are sustainable, both financially and also from an organizational structure, then it's much more easier that these initiatives really become independent, for example, and they grow into independent organizations or foundations per se.
Thank you. Vivian, do you want to react on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a huge challenge is people who actually don't believe in climate change, you know? Because there is a lot of people who are not even just citizenships. I mean, I'm talking about corporate leaders or some social leaders, to not get political. But I feel that in this case, in our case, we don't focus just on the work that we can do inside of the schools, because we feel that the whole that a lot of people need to know about this. That's why we work with the seniors. And while they work in the urban farm, we teach them why that is important, and that someday, if we don't change our habits, we wouldn't have food to take to our table. So to me, is the biggest challenge. People who actually feel like, we are doing okay. Oh yeah, it's a little bit harder, but it's gonna be good the next day. Or, oh yeah, it's floating somewhere, but it's not near here, so it's not my thing, that's not my problem. Because sometimes that's the way that we humans think, you know, like we just are aware of what is surrounding us. But yeah, that's our work focus on. Like the more people know about what is going on the planet, that we are going through a planetary crisis is more important to us, so we can make a call to action, like you need to do something now. Those 1.5, we are achieving it like tomorrow. Yeah. So, yes.
Deb, you want to react now? Yes.
Yeah, if I can just respond to something. So one of the things.
It's a round table, so you can react.
Excellent.
I've got a question.
It feels like a semicircle table here, but so one of the things that there's a lot in learning sciences around is that idea of learning ecologies. And when we think about climate change education as a socio-ecological system, then we understand that we actually have to learn lifelong, life-wide, life-deep, that idea, and that it has to be at all levels of the system. And so I would say one of the biggest challenges is that leadership, so people with power in different ways, either political decision-making, funders, others, they may not understand. So there's different kinds of leadership, right? There's leadership that's non-educational and there's leadership that's educational. Non-educational leadership often doesn't understand education. They have something called the apprenticeship of observation problem, where you all went to school, so you think you know what it is, you know. so that issue is a real trouble, and climate change education is not going to just be about school-based education. It's going to be life-wide, right?
My question follows what you said there, Deb and Vivian, because I wanted just to ask you, finally, do we know precisely what are the effects of climate change education on the school, on the behavior on school children and their families? What do we know today? What's from your experience?
This goes a little bit to the question that the first panel was discussing, right?
Yes.
In terms of climate
I'm
anxiety.
interested to hear it from you.
I do actually believe, and this is what studies show, that climate change education is a major element that contributes to anxiety and mental health issues in children and young people. So taking their concerns, their emotions seriously and dealing with this is first of all very important, I believe. Secondly, and this goes a little bit back to what was said earlier in several discussions today, that climate change is a reality, but the question is, how do we help teachers and also children to deal with this reality and not to resignate, basically, because this is also happened, what studies show, that young people basically, they resignate. They say, well, there's nothing I can do anymore. This should not be the case. So how can we basically create a path forward? How can we create a vision together with teachers, together with educators, together with stakeholders in the entire ecosystem, and help young people, help children and young adults to deal with this anxiety, but also to find a sense of hope in a sense that something can be done. So I think it is extremely important, and I was talking only now from the perspective of the children. Of course, this refers to the families as well, and this refers to the teachers, of course, as well.
Do you want to react or not?
Yeah, there's significant research, actually, that connects learning of climate, sustainability, environment, depends how you frame it over time. It's been changed names in different ways. The challenge that we face with that research is that it's not synthesized. Right now, Eric and I are leading a section on the Handbook of Climate Change Education that's being produced, and that effort will synthesize a lot of this work into one volume. And there have been a number of other scholars working on the Greening Education Partnership is synthesizing different pieces of work. So there are a number of efforts right now happening. The challenge, I think, with all of that work is the literature and the research literature is one part of it. There's a whole ton of practice work going on right now and emerging as we speak. Trying to get that work and the research work all together in one spot is very difficult to synthesize. And that's why I would say we come back to relational networks of practice and research iterations that just have to be a reality going forward. We need that connective tissue of people that are funding those ongoing synthesis efforts into practice and from practice into research so that we can help inform what to do next. We don't have another decade to wait for this. This is like, oh, I wanted to correct that too. The Paris Agreement, by the way, the Paris Agreement is in 2015. 1994, Article 6 had education listed. So it's been there since 1994. It was actually seen as the very first thing, one of the very first things to mobilize climate change action.
Vivian, you want to say something?
Well, I say we have still a long way to see the effects of climate education. I think we all here are approaching different ways to contribute to this situation. And the more we evaluate and monitor everything that we are doing, we will have proof that the actual effects that we are making in the community, in our case, or in the classroom, or in the actions that we want to promote with our initiatives.
Thank you for all this input. Just before inviting you to ask your questions, if you have some, I just have a little poll to do. Do we have some teachers in the room? Raising the hand, like really high, please. Okay, some, okay. Again, I haven't seen everybody. Yeah, okay, so you are around 10 to 15 people, 15 teachers, so thank you, because we're talking about teaching. Just wanted to check that we have a few teachers, because we don't know about school, I understood, for Deb. I've been to school, but still, I don't know anything, but I agree with her. So it's quite interesting to have you in the room. So do we have questions for this fantastic panel? So raise your hands and take your chance. Yes, which Adeline could, thank you, just give them the mic. Behind us, we had the lady first, and then sir. Just the lady was the first one to raise her hand. Sorry, I'm going to take that.
Oh,
thank you.
Hi.
Could you just introduce yourself, your country, your name, your country, and then...
Hi, my name is Juan from Shanghai, China, and I'm running an NGO called Shanghai Green Light Year Environmental Service Center.
Thank you.
Yeah. I noticed the two roundtables, only one gentleman, and the rest of them are ladies. Yes, I'm very interested because I'm the newcomer from the climate change education, but I'm also the experienced NGO runner for ESD in China since 2014. But my question is how the climate change education will face the majority of the teachers force, which are women. I think that's from around the world, and in China also, an NGO sector for the environmental education, climate change related education, mainly are women. So how the gender equality issues could be incorporated into the climate education, I think that's how, I don't know what is going on here from this angle. Please share any perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then just exclusivity. Next roundtable will be only feminine. Okay. I mean, the best specialist on climate change is going to be women. So sorry for that. I mean, not sorry. I mean, that's a good news. Okay. Do you have an answer for Juan?
There's actually a great gender equity in climate change education. There's great work by Christina Kwok, Dr. Kwok. So, but in this area, it's interesting because Sustainable Development Goal 4 talks about education and gender equity in education in particular. And so really understanding the power balances that exist in the world is an interesting dilemma. I spend most of my life dealing with men because I work generally speaking with people who have power, and historically that has been men. And so, like, thinking about how we do that work and how we engage and bridge those gaps is actually a critical part of the justice project in this work.
I think I don't have anything to add to say, but I think it's just a fascinating question. And if anyone does more research on that, I mean, also from a global perspective, I mean, first of all, I would be very interested in statistics. Is it the case that most teachers teaching climate change education are female? Is that different in various countries? I mean, that would be fascinating. And to see what is basically the impact then of climate change education if you take the gender perspective. So I don't have any answer, but I think it's a fantastic question, and I would be very open to share some of your experiences and your thoughts and studies in this field, maybe from the audience even here.
Jan, you want to say something?
I totally agree with you. In our case, in our foundation, we are like more than 60% women. So it's because people, I mean, it's open. When we have a new job position, you apply. So I sometimes, but this has no data to support what I'm going to say. I will say like maybe women are more interest in social work and education in general, but there is no data to support my statement.
Thank you. We had another question, sir?
My name is Yusuf Subuti from Iran, and
Could
my
you
partner
just bring the mic close to your mouth?
Would you stand up, please? We are from Iran. I think there are many
Close to your mouth.
There are many individual experiences and experiments in different countries. And I really would like to hear more from the audience, and the roundtables that you have arranged. It's somewhat limiting.
Yeah, it's limited. It's just the organization for the moment. We've got roundtables, but you'll have time, of course, to expose all your experiments. I mean, that's these 4 days. They're just devoted to that. So for sure you'll have it, but not this morning. That's just, you'll have to wait. You've got to be patient. I'm sorry for that. So the question, I mean, do you have some question for the...
Wait a minute, wait a minute. You're talking too fast for me. English and French is not my language, my mother language, so I'm a bit slow. I'm also astrophysicist, Pierre. Did you know that? I know that. We've had participated in the meetings with Pierre, and in the past 2 years he comes and gives a lecture to us, of course online, right? In 2 meetings of us.
I'm sorry, sir, but we've got only a few minutes for asking questions for the panel, so I'm really interested with it.
I don't have any questions from the panel.
Okay, so if you want, you'll talk afterwards.
My request is I would like to hear more experiences from the audience.
Thank you. I mean, I'll just, the OCE is present, and I'm sure it will happen. Thank you. And sir, you've got a question?
Thank you. I am Anwar Ramjoon from the Mauritius, small island developing states in the Indian Ocean. Thank you very much. I would like to make an observation and a question. Observation related to in terms of gender equality. I think there is many more women represented in this regrouping, and I think also the impact of climate change is more on the woman, and women empowerment needs to be more empowered in terms of decision making at all levels in this world. Now, my question relates to your topic of the day of this roundtable is, do you think that you look at networking and funding, do you think that eco-anxiety and emotional intelligence in any climate change education program, wherever it is, should be driving you or should initiate you in supporting policy initiatives to embed climate change education? Thank you.
I can't hear. That's a tough one. Okay, so.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. There is a lot of conversation in the last couple of years, in particular, around socio-emotional learning, eco-anxiety. It's a really interesting dilemma, because if you look at communities that are frontline communities globally, and in northern or however you frame that, you know, the global north, in some of the marginalized communities in the global north, the eco-anxiety conversation is a weird way to frame it, because life is an eco-anxiety issue, right? And so it seems a little what I would call neoliberal, like a little bit like a rich privileged perspective to focus only on that. I think we have to center our work, as has been said by many speakers this morning, on action. How do we empower for action? How do we have learning for action? And through that, as many people are saying here, that is how we get at socio-emotional. But I think if we focus on socio-emotional from a policy perspective, we do disservice to the actual science basis and the need that we have for a broader scope of climate change education.
Well, in our case, we took the principles that UNESCO recommend when you develop pedagogical content, that they have 3 principles. You need to work in the cognitive part, also the emotional part, and then the behavioral part. So it's not just transmit knowledge, but also the emotion, the people needs to, the students need to relate in a socio-emotional way with what is happening so they can take action on it. Most of our activities ended up with some kind of action. All these books has challenges. So this is the way, it's all about, in this case, is all about storytelling. It's for you. I just brought it for you. Well, this starts with a storytelling, and then they develop different challenges according to the different ages of the possible students. So that's the way we deal with that scenario that you are presenting.
I very much agree with what you're saying. I think there's also one element to it, and that is that probably the threat or the reality of climate change and the need for climate change education differs no matter where you are, basically from what perspective you're speaking, right? So to give you one example, we are also doing a lot of work on sustainable energy solutions in Africa, working with social entrepreneurs. And of course, we would like to push sustainable green energy solutions. But some of the communities we are working with and some of the social entrepreneurs that basically help to roll out some of the initiatives, they basically raise the question, well, first of all, there is the need to have access to energy, no matter whether it's green energy or whether it's non-green energy. So I think your question also tackles a really important part, is that the responsibility to talk about climate change education, the need for advocacy, and the need in the various different countries and communities might differ. And I think this needs to be taken into consideration, specifically if we talk about this approach of having a more networked approach, a more networked conversations about this matter.
Oh, just talk in the mic because people are just on the internet.
Just to touch on what you just said, your last final word, and I think that has implication for the future teacher education program we want to develop and implement in our respective countries. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. I would just allow a last question because I saw that Jan from the OCE had a question. OCE is allowed to ask question too, you know. Huh? I mean, like everybody.
Well, I'm changing a bit.
So Jan, please.
It's a bridge question between this roundtable and the next roundtable.
Thank you.
It's about access to financing, basically. So it was, I think, Deb, you mentioned it a little bit, this idea between competition versus collaboration. But we know from experience, but also research and what other organizations tell us, that there might be enough money out there, but the process of accessing that money sometimes is very limiting. So my question to you as foundations is, what is your process? How do you build that process to be as inclusive as possible? How do you actually ensure within your process that you're reaching the right communities through the process itself? And maybe through Deb, what have you seen as a limitation in the process of actually trying to get funding? What are some of the obstacles that you would like to see gone?
Thank you. Your answers in a short way, please.
Okay. Well, in our case, we manage 17 urban spaces, more than 200,000 square meters. So it's not like we choose the people. People come to our spaces, and what we do is like we work with communities or the entities that are around those spaces, around the library or the uvas or the park, etc. So all our initiatives it has like a large impact to the citizens in general in the city of Medellin. On the second part regarding funding, we are very fortunate because as we are part of the EPM group, which is the second largest economic group in our country, they give us the money to do all this work. Sometimes we actually apply more to have opportunities like this to carry out.
I'm not sure the question was this question. Was it, Jan?
Funding?
It was a bit more about the access for the stakeholders, for the people coming with a project to you as a foundation and asking. So for them, it seems to be a bit complex and sometimes high level just to get to that financing. So that was his question, I guess.
Yeah, but in our case, it's like all that we do is free to everybody. I think that can respond what you were asking.
In a way. Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah. I think it's. Thank you for this very difficult question, and right at the end. Maybe to sort of like talk a little bit about different funding schemes of foundations. Of course, there are foundations that basically predominantly provide grants and philanthropic funding for certain initiatives. We as a foundation work as an operative foundation. So in other words, we don't provide funds or grants for projects or initiatives, but what we basically do is, and I was trying to describe this co-creative process, for example, also working with the Office for Climate Education, in basically designing program and initiatives, and then having the financial as well as other resources that we contribute toward the program. That's item number one. Item number two is that we are always in there for a longer run. So we are not really funding something for 1 year or 2 years, but our idea is always to be there for the longer period, as long as it takes for the initiative to be sustainable, to find additional partners, national donors, etc. The third aspect is the question you were raising about how to get, like, if you're looking to have a funding partner, to have a foundation that's supporting one of the initiatives, how do you get access, right? How do you create basically a system in that it's not only the foundation reaching out to potential partners, but it's the partners basically reaching out. And there is not a single answer to that. We are working with different methods. So we are working, for example, and this has been mentioned a lot in my comments today, with networks such as the Red STEM network. We're working with similar networks in Africa where educators, but also social entrepreneurs are building strong networks and coming up with new ideas with programs that they then present for funding. We are also working, and this comes more from the social entrepreneurial world, with calls. So we basically come up with specific calls, looking for initiatives and basically sharing these calls that provide access to funding and mentoringship with various communities. But it is a question that is tricky because it's also a question about from a critical theory, which is my background, power relations, right? So how do you make sure that it's not the giving institution, the funding institution, that is creating the channels, but that it's actually working the other way around? And that could be an ongoing debate for maybe another panel or a couple of days.
I'd be quite tempted to stop on this. Would be okay? Or Deb, you want a last sentence?
Last
2 sentences. Okay, go for it.
Okay. So one of the things that is being named here is the need for a middle out strategy. So ways that we can micro grant into smaller spaces, because that lessens the load of grant applications and that incredible amount of knowledge that's needed to do that. And it also provides those relational, trusted ways that money's moving. So that middle out strategy, I think, is an amazing, which is what you just named. The Thriving Community Network in the US is also doing a similar thing, working exactly like has been described here, hubs, networks, and funding into the hubs, and then through relational networks out into smaller bits. Really amazing work.
Thank you. Thank you for all this, for this panel. It was really interesting. Thank you all. And we can applaud them, please.
Thank you, Dorothy.